Hello, and welcome to Dining with Death. This episode is on my playlist, Dining with the Departed, where we talk about famous and infamous people who have passed. We discuss their lives, their careers, what made them famous or infamous, and then I show you and taste either their last meal or their favorite food. Before we begin, please like the video. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and you can also join my Patreon. We have a big goal there that I will talk about at the end of the video. I'm Stacy Lee. Let's begin. There are so many talented people in this world. I think now more than ever, we recognize just how many great singers and great guitar players and great drummers there are in the world because we have TikTok and YouTube. It's so much easier for us to see the talent that's out there now. And I also think that because of TikTok and YouTube, musicians and artists are much, much better than they were even 20 years ago. Kids are exposed to so much more than I was in my youth. And so they not only have more motivation to become great, they have the means and the access to knowledge and education that I never had. Are you guys on musician TikTok or YouTube at all? 12-year-old guitar players now are better than 30-year-old guitar players were 10 years ago. They have so much information to absorb and so many videos to watch and so many people to emulate. It's pushing them to greater heights. I've been trying to master a piano piece called Solfeggietto by Bach for, 40 years. And imagine my horror when I realized, I've never actually heard this piece. And so I got on YouTube about 5 or 6 years ago and listened to it. I've been practicing at about half speed. The piece has a lot of finger work, very intense, very fast. It's twice as fast as I thought it was. That's just one example of how that wouldn't happen now. Because if somebody was trying to master something, they'd be like, oh, let me go watch somebody play it. And then they'd realize what they're aiming for. I never had that. And the way that our world is connected now is making fantastic musicians. Even with so very many talented singers and musicians and artists in the world, every generation, there are a handful that rise to the top and that are in a totally different class than the rest. Chris Cornell, Lady Gaga, Danny Carey, Dave Grohl, just to name a few. And today we are talking about one of those artists, one from an era that has lost not just a few, but most of its stars much too young. Chester Bennington was born on March 20th, 1976 in Phoenix, Arizona, to a nurse and a police detective. Chester was abused by an older male friend when he was only 7 years old, and the abuse continued until he was 13. He didn't ever dare tell anyone about the abuse because he was afraid that people would accuse him of being gay or being a liar. This abuse left Chester terribly scarred, and most people close to him believe it's what led to his substance abuse and eventual death. He was an incredibly traumatized human being, and he suffered greatly because of what happened to him as a child. Years later, Chester would tell his father who his abuser was, but he did not want to go public and never pressed charges. When Chester was 11 years old, his parents divorced, and this left Chester alone a lot, many times with his abuser. And this period of his life, he describes as pure hell. He later said he wanted to kill everyone and then run away. His escape was writing poetry and drawing a lot. When the divorce was final, Chester's father got custody of him and perhaps was working a little too much, maybe didn't keep as close an eye on him as he could have. Chester was bullied terribly in school because he was skinny and kind of different looking. Before he was even 14 years old, he was smoking pot, drinking, and using hard drugs. He moved in with his mother, and she tried to tighten up the rules in order to keep him from using. Chester showed an early interest in music. He was a very talented guy with a lot of abilities. I'm going to tell you a little party trick of mine. You can try it and see if it works. I'm not a big believer in astrology. I'm not like a hardcore astrology person, but there are certain things that I cannot deny. And when I found out Chester is a Pisces and also a musician, Jason and I were in San Diego a couple weeks ago, and we met this bartender that we really connected with. So we went out with him after he got off work one night, and we were hanging out. The guy's like 25 or 26 years old. He's from France. We're talking, and I said, well, I think you're, since you're a Cancer. And the guy was like, how did you know I'm a Cancer? And I'm like, I can just always spot another Cancer. I'm a Cancer and I can always spot another Cancer. I don't know how. I just can. It's just one of those things I can't explain. And I'll tell you another thing. If you find out that someone is a Pisces and they're very artistic, musically inclined, artistically inclined, 9 times out of 10, they're left-handed. I don't know why this is, but I'm telling you, at 53 years old, I have learned that it rings true. When I recorded my first album, the bass player that I hired was a kid named Jeremy Nelson. And I met him on the first day of the sessions, the studio sessions. And he walked in, sat down and started warming up on his bass. And I noticed that he was playing left-handed. And I said, "Oh, are you a Pisces?" And his face he was like, "I just met you, what?" And I'm like, "I don't know, musicians that are left-handed are most often Pisces." And he was like, "What?" So yeah, I looked up Chester's zodiac and his birthday, and he is a Pisces, and he is also left-handed. So he's artistic, left-handed, and a Pisces. I'm telling you, it's a thing. After Chester moved in with his mother, he got a job at Burger King, and he worked there for a little while, and he was continuing to use during that time. He was living in an apartment with some friends when a gang broke into his house knowing that there were drugs there, and Chester was pistol whipped. And that made him quit drugs for a while. He was very, very scared about being in that lifestyle for a little bit. But sadly, the drugs made their way back into his life. During this same period of time, Chester joined a band called Sean Dowdle and His Friends. This band wrote original music and released a 3-track cassette in 1993. Sean and Chester then formed a band called Grey Days, and that project turned out 2 albums, one in 1994 and one in 1998. A few years into his music career, Chester had become very frustrated. The music world is not a kind world, and it's not a world that's healthy for people who struggle with their self-image. Hell, it's not healthy for people with a healthy self-image. And Chester was to a point where he decided he wanted to quit music altogether. But then Jeff Blue from Zomba Music called Chester and asked him to come and audition with a new band he was representing. At that time, the band was called Zero with an X. Chester decided to give it one last go. He quit his job in Phoenix and went to California to audition. The A&R reps were there for the audition and they loved him, and so did the other bandmates. Chester, along with Mike Shinoda, began trying out songs, but they couldn't really find a place in the industry and they had a hard time finding a record deal. Those of you that are Linkin Park fans, they don't sound like anybody else. And it makes it hard when you have a really original sound sometimes to get a deal, because record companies, don't get me started, and labels want something that's proven to be a success. So when somebody comes along with a brand new sound, either they blow up or they have a really hard time getting a deal because their sound is different and unproven. And that's kind of what happened with Linkin Park in the beginning. In the beginning of Linkin Park, after they changed their name from Zero, they started out as kind of a nu metal band. Nu metal, that's a genre with bands like Korn and Limp Bizkit, System of a Down. But that sound kind of started to lose momentum by the late 90s. And so Chester and Mike decided to switch up their sound. They didn't want to stay with a genre that was kind of winding down in popularity. So they did something very smart. They let other artists in and they began to collaborate. I'm going to say something that always gets me in trouble. I love Lenny Kravitz. I don't own a Lenny Kravitz album. That always starts a conversation. And what I mean by it is this. Lenny Kravitz is great, but he plays the guitars, the drums, he writes, he produces, he sings, he does everything himself. So the albums to me don't have a lot of variety to them. I love the singles and I love him as an artist. I think he's amazing. But sometimes you need to bring in other collaborators to season your sound. Of course, too many cooks can spoil the broth. So it's a fine line of walking between bringing other people in, listening to other people's opinion, and creating your own sound. But I think what Linkin Park did was really smart. They started working with artists you wouldn't expect to appear on their records, most notably hip-hop king Jay-Z. Chester and Mike have a lot of hip-hop influences, and so for them, it was a natural collaboration. For the music world, it was something entirely different. Linkin Park is one of the few bands that mixes metal and rap. It's one of only a handful of bands that's done it successfully. Chester Bennington was blessed. He was born with a natural gift. His voice is incredibly durable and strong. It can be very warm. He has a very warm tenor sound one moment, and the next it's piercing with his trademark higher pitched screams. It's a very unique sound, and combined with Mike Shinoda's more classical male vocals, it's really something special. Very much like a Layne Staley and Jerry Cantrell type of a vibe. Two guys that just sound amazing together, angelic at times. Chester was a very emotional performer. He felt the music and he connected with his audience in a way that so many frontmen do not. People connected with Chester's performances and they connected with his pain. His lyrics are dark, sometimes very dark. He wrote about death and he wrote about the meaning of life, and he wrote about his struggle with making sense of it all. I could talk a lot about Chester's accomplishments. Linkin Park has been nominated for 197 music awards and won 67 of those 195 times. It's an incredible set of numbers. Many artists would be happy with a single nomination, a handful at best, and one win. To win 67 times, that's an epic band. I could talk about the countries he visited and the sold-out shows he played, but in these episodes, I always find that information a bit hollow because I can't play you any of the artist's music on this platform. And so talking about those events without hearing the music always falls short for me. So instead, I like to focus on who they were as a person so we can get to know them a little bit better. In 2006, Chester got sober for the first time in many, many years. He told Spin magazine, "It's not cool to be an alcoholic. It's not cool to drink and be a dumbass. It's cool to be a part of recovery. Most of my work has been a reflection of what I've been going through in one way or another." His sobriety lasted for years, but Chester continued to struggle. Whenever we lose a singer-songwriter or a musician with really dark lyrics in the way we lost Chester, and people say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it." Really? If you listen to the lyrics of these artists, they're not well. That darkness comes from somewhere. It comes from a genuine place of pain. If an artist is posing to be in pain, they don't make the connection with their audience that these types of artists make. People connect with Chris Cornell. They connect with Scott Weiland. They connect with Layne Staley. They connect with Chester Bennington because their pain was genuine. It was authentic. And it's the authenticness of their pain that joins them with the people that listen to their music. But that pain also drives them to substance abuse, and it often drives them to end their lives. And so whenever we lose one of them and people say they can't believe it, I think, well, then you didn't listen to the lyrics, because this is obviously a person who has had a very long struggle. Chester had a son named Jamie with his girlfriend Ella Brand in 1996, and then he adopted Ella's son Isaiah. He got married to Samantha Ullett that same year, and the couple had a son named Draven, who was born in 2002. Chester and Samantha split in 2005, and he then married to Linda Bentley. The couple has 3 children, Tyler Lee Bennington, born in 2006, and twins Lily and Lila, born in 2011. Chester was a wonderful father, and he loved his children. He was also a sports fanatic. He loved the Phoenix Suns. He was a fan of the Arizona Cardinals and the Dodgers, and he also loved Formula One racing. He played a lot of sports too. He was very fit, and he loved to play basketball. He did seem to have a lot of injuries. He would often hurt himself while playing ball. There were a couple of times he hurt his ankle so badly he had to cancel shows. But again, he was very, very into fitness and athleticism. Always something that is such a strange thing to me that I can never wrap my head around because I have not ever done drugs. How do people work out and be an addict at the same time? I don't understand it. You guys can answer that in the comments. It's something I don't understand, because I know if I don't feel good, the last thing I'm going to do is go work out. But there are people that do it. Chester even surfed with Kelly Slater, and he became a really good surfer. His friends say that he loved the ocean and he loved being at the beach. He loved reggae, and Bob Marley was one of his favorite artists. And friends remember Chester playing Bob Marley music in the car all the time. He even had dreads for a while he was in grade A's. But there are 2 things that Chester was most known for. The first was that he was a prankster. He would spend money on things like Bigfoot statues that would end up on the front lawns of his friends' houses, wearing a cowboy hat and holding a beer. He'd send empty crates to his buddies, touting that something was coming in the next one, only to send another empty crate. He told lots of jokes, and he was always smiling and laughing, even though he dealt with a lot of personal pain. And the second thing that friends remember most about Chester, he would eat anything put in front of him. I'm going to go into more of that in a moment. On May 26, 2017, Chester Bennington gave a performance that was unlike anything he had ever given before. He stood at the funeral of one of his best friends, Chris Cornell, and told the mourners, "My name is Chester. I had the great privilege of being a friend of Chris and invited to be a member of his family." Then Brad Delson from Linkin Park got out his guitar, and Chester sang a heartbreaking version of Hallelujah. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. He then said to his friend Chris, who had passed on, "Your voice was joy and pain, anger and forgiveness, love and heartache, all wrapped into one. I suppose that's what we all are. You helped me understand that." Less than 2 months later, Chester would be gone as well. On the morning of July 20th, 2017, he was found dead in his Palo Verde estate near Los Angeles. Chester had taken his own life by way of hanging. Days before, he'd been in Arizona with his wife and kids, but suddenly said he felt like he needed to go home to work. He returned to Los Angeles, where he took his life. He had consumed half a bottle of alcohol before doing so. The world mourned the death of this superstar, this Renaissance man, this poet, and this sensitive soul. All the same questions were asked. Why? He had the whole world. He loved his children dearly. He was a wonderful father, a wonderful friend. But as we all know, these are unanswerable questions. There is never a reason that we all understand when someone chooses this for themselves. It's always a tragedy, and it's always a loss, and the music world lost one of the best it ever had on that day. Now, I spent hours and hours trying to find out what Chester Bennington's favorite food was, and I could not find a single thing that verified he had a favorite food. I even contacted his personal chef, Gray Rowland, on Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, and asked if Chester had a favorite food, but I never heard back. But I did find something really cool that happened right before Chester passed away. In early 2017, a Los Angeles-based restaurant called Plan Check teamed up with Linkin Park to create a meal pack inspired by the band members' heritages. The band is culturally diverse, and they like to eat a culturally diverse diet. The menu consisted of an ahi tuna tostada. This looks amazing. A grilled cheese called the Heavy, which is pulled pork and barbecue sauce on toasted bread with lots of melted cheese. Kimchi dusted fries. That sounds amazing. I'm assuming like powdered gochujang, garlic, other kimchi flavors on fries. A dessert called the OML Cruller, OML meaning One More Light, which was the title of the album they were working on at the time. And then a mandarin and black cherry cream soda, which just sounds insane. So I chose to make for you and show you one of the items off of the Linkin Park menu made especially for them. Stay with me, I'll be right back. This is the ahi tuna tostada from the Linkin Park menu. That's what sounded best to me. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the appeal of the tostada escapes me. I don't know how to eat this thing. I would just rather have a taco. I'm not really sure what the tostada is all about, but it sounded really good. I made a little ponzu sauce, a very little. So I'm gonna drizzle that over the top. I wanted to do that last minute so it's nice and fresh. And I'm not even gonna try to pick this up and eat it. I'm gonna break this and scoop up a piece of tuna and some of the little microgreens. Oh yeah. Here's a little bite with everything. I've got a fried corn tortilla on the bottom, a little radish shaving, some baby arugula, green onions, and some raw ahi tuna. That's to die for. The strong bitter radish with the sweet ahi tuna and the sweet ponzu sauce on that crispy corn tortilla is really good. That's a good one. Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death, Dining with the Departed, as we remembered Chester Bennington. Please hit the like button if you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and you can always join my Patreon. For a couple bucks a month, if that's what you want to give, you keep the videos coming. We also have a goal on Patreon, and after the first of the year, I'm going to start hitting this really hard. I want to raise money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that cannot be tested because they will not release funds to test it. There are thousands of sexual assault kits sitting in refrigeration that have never been tested. They cost between $500 and $750 a kit. I want to raise money, and then as a community, we decide which case we're going to take on. We're going to get that DNA tested. So if you can join Patreon to keep the videos coming, eventually you will be a part of that as well. I've got a lot of new people here lately, thanks to SKD, Crime Reel, and Deadbug. Again, I want to say thank you to those creators for helping me. I know we were kind of trying to mess with the algorithm a little bit, but it helped me. I was the beneficiary, and I'm so grateful. Welcome if you're new. I will do my best for you. Please feel free to chime in and let me know what you want to see. And thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. It means the world to me. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.